Their bodies were breaking the laws of physics. A spine bent backwards at a perfect 45-degree angle. A jaw locked open in a silent scream for 3 weeks. Fingers frozen into claws so rigid they would snap before they'd ever straighten again. These 17 nuns weren't just possessed. They were being sculpted, turned into human statues. And the Catholic Church had a 4-step manual for how to do it. But that's not even the worst part. These women stayed like this for months, some for years, trapped inside a prison of their own flesh and bone. And this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mass delusion spiraling out of control. This was orchestrated, a deliberate, chillingly effective process that weaponized the human mind against the human body. By the end of this, you will understand the 4-step medical mechanism that made this horror possible. You'll see why historians tried to bury this story for centuries. And you'll realize how this exact same psychological weapon is creating mass hysteria. Right now in 2025, because here is the terrifying truth they erased from the history books. There were no demons in Laudun, just a weaponized understanding of the human psyche so effective. It still works today. Hit subscribe right now, because by the end of this video, you will see medical evidence that will shatter everything you thought you knew about religious history. And the social contagions spreading through our world today. Let me take you back. France, 1634, the small town of Laudun, population 14,000, a beautiful church, a thriving marketplace, and 17 Ursuline nuns who were about to become the central players in the largest, most weaponized case of mass psychogenic illness in history. The official story. These nuns were possessed, invaded by demons, sent by a man named Father Urbain Grandier. He was handsome, charismatic, and he had made powerful enemies. He deposed Cardinal Richelieu's plan to destroy the town's fortifications. He'd seduced multiple women, or so the rumors claimed, and now he had supposedly signed a pact with Satan himself. But look past the smoke and mirrors of demonology, and you'll find a cold, clinical blueprint. A 4-step process that church authorities understood perfectly, even if they didn't have our modern medical terms for it. It all started inside the Ursuline convent. With the Mother Superior Jeanne des Anges, she began having dreams. Visions of Father Grandier appearing in her cell in the dead of night, attempting to seduce her. Then the dreams became waking nightmares. She began having violent seizures during prayer. Her body would arch backward, her spine contorting. She'd scream obscenities in languages she had never studied. And then, the crucial catalyst. The other nuns were forced to watch. They were gathered in the chapel 3 times a day, and made to form a circle around their Mother Superior. They were not allowed to look away, not permitted to leave. For hours they watched her torment. They witnessed her body betray her. Within 3 weeks, it was no longer just one woman. 16 more nuns began showing identical symptoms. The hysteria had gone viral. The stage was set. The pressure cooker was sealed. And the church authorities arrived not with doctors, but with exorcists. They promised salvation. What they delivered was step 1 of the process, isolation. But what they did next in the town square, in front of thousands of screaming spectators, would lock these women into a nightmare they could never wake up from. Now imagine you are one of them. A young nun, just 23 years old. The cold stone walls of this convent are your entire world, your only family. The only authority you know is now convulsing on the floor before you. And you are told for 3 hours a day that you cannot escape the evil that has taken her. This was the pressure cooker of step 1, total isolation. But this isolation wasn't just physical, it was informational. These women had no letters from home, no visits from family offering a different perspective, no physician whispering that this might be a medical condition, not a demonic one. Their reality was being systematically narrowed to a single, terrifying script. Demons are real. Mother Superior is possessed. And you are next. The physician François Pidou documented the terrifyingly precise timeline. Day 1, only Mother Superior shows symptoms. Day 7, 2 younger nuns develop uncontrollable tremors during prayer. Day 14. 5 more reports seeing demonic figures in the shadows. Day 21. 16 of the 17 nuns in the convent are now exhibiting identical, violent seizures. Modern neuroscience has a term for this: mirror neuron activation. When you are isolated and you obsessively watch someone in your social group, especially an authority figure, perform an action, your brain fires the same neural pathways as if you were performing that action yourself. In this echo chamber of fear, their brains literally could not distinguish between watching the horror and becoming the horror. Within 3 weeks, the convent physician wrote that the seizures had become uniform. The same arching spines, the same guttural screams, the same phrases spoken in distorted tongues. They weren't consciously copying. Their isolated, traumatized brains had accepted this performance as the only possible response to their unbearable reality. And that's when the authorities slammed the door shut on any hope of escape. They initiated Step 2, suggestion. On November 15, 1634, the Church made a decision that sealed these women's fates. The exorcisms would not be private, discreet prayers. They would be public spectacles, held 3 times a day, in the town square, with thousands of spectators traveling from across France to witness the battle between heaven and hell. And here is where it becomes diabolical. The lead exorcist, Father Jean-Joseph Surin, didn't just pray. He coached. In front of the roaring crowd, he would demand of a writhing nun, "What is the demon's name?" If she uttered something weak, something unconvincing, he would correct her. "No! The demon's name is Asmodeus. Say it." And the nun, in a state of genuine psychological and physiological distress, would latch onto this new truth. Yes, of course, the demon's name is Asmodeus. Father Surin kept a list. 7 specific demons, each with a prescribed behavior. Asmodeus contorted the body backwards. Zabulon provoked blasphemy. Zacharon forced them to speak in unknown tongues. The exorcist was literally writing the script for their possession, and their desperate minds were accepting it without question. But writing the script was one thing. Making it permanent was another. For that, they needed Step 3, repetition. A grinding, brutal physical repetition that would burn this new reality directly into their nervous systems, and that process would break their bodies in a way that some would never, ever recover from. The public exorcisms did not last for days, or even weeks. They continued for 8 grueling months, 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and evening. The nuns were paraded before the crowds and subjected to rituals that lasted between 2 and 4 hours each. Do the math with me. 8 months, 3 sessions a day. Let's call it 3 hours per session. That is over 2,000 hours. 2,000 hours of forced, high-stakes performance. Modern psychology has a term for what this repetition does to the human brain: repetition-induced automaticity. When you repeat a behavior enough times, especially under extreme emotional distress and physical exhaustion, it stops being a conscious choice. It becomes an automatic, involuntary program. Your body begins to execute the script without your brain's deliberate input. It becomes who you are. By February of 1635, just 3 months into this nightmare, the physician Pierre Hilaire documented a chilling shift. He wrote that the nuns no longer required prompting. They would fall into their seizures spontaneously. Their bodies would contort into the prescribed positions. Their mouths would form the blasphemous phrases, or without a single command from the exorcists. Their nervous systems had learned the script so deeply, it had become the default setting. But here is the truly horrifying part. The part where psychological torment crosses into irreversible physical damage. Their bodies were beginning to break down under the immense strain. Because subjecting your muscles to violent daily seizures isn't just psychological torture. It's a physiological catastrophe, and that catastrophe is Step 4, physical exhaustion. The step that turned these living, breathing women into the human statues history remembers. In March of 1635, something new and terrifying emerged. The nuns' convulsions weren't stopping when the exorcisms ended. Their bodies were starting to lock in place. Let me explain what happens to the human body when you force it into violent, repeated muscle contractions for months on end. This is where the horror becomes purely medical, and the demonic lies fall completely away. When your muscles contract, they consume energy, they produce lactic acid. They develop microscopic tears that create inflammation. Normally you rest, your body repairs itself. But these women were given no rest. They were performing, convulsing 3 times a day, every single day. By April, the physician Guillaume de Ricci documented something that terrified even the hardened exorcists. The contractions were becoming permanent. Sister Claire de Cecilie's hands had curved into rigid, frozen claws. Her fingers could not be straightened, not because she was resisting, but because the tendons and muscles had physically shortened and remodeled from being held in that clenched position for months on end. The medical term for this is a flexion contracture. It's the same process that happens to severe burn victims when scar tissue pulls their limbs into fixed, unmovable positions. Sister Louise de Nogaret's spine had curved backward into a position so extreme it can fracture vertebrae. She remained bent backwards for 6 weeks. When physicians finally managed to straighten her, she could not walk for 3 months. Her muscles had literally forgotten how. This is not possession. This is biomechanics. Push the human body past its breaking point and it will break. Force muscles to contract intensely enough, frequently enough, for long enough, and they will physically lock. The nervous system, overwhelmed by constant stress signals, simply stops sending the relax command. By June of 1635, 11 of the 17 nuns showed permanent physical deformities: bent spines, clawed hands, jaws that would not close. They were living statues, trapped in a prison of their own tissue. And while their bodies were being destroyed, this evidence of demonic possession was being used to burn an innocent man at the stake. While these women were trapped in bodies that had turned against them, the real purpose of this 4-step horror show reached its brutal conclusion. On August 18, 1634, Father Urbain Grandier was burned alive in the public square of Loudun. His execution was based entirely on the testimony of the possessed nuns. Never mind that several of these witnesses were now physically frozen, their words slurred or silenced by their own locked jaws. Never mind the physicians' reports documenting obvious coaching. Never mind that Grandier's real crime was opposing Cardinal Richelieu's political agenda. The frozen, contorted nuns were the ultimate proof. Living, breathing, screaming evidence of demonic power. How could anyone possibly argue with that? But here is the question that haunted the medical community for centuries. The question the Church desperately did not want asked. If this was the work of demons, why did it follow such a predictable medical pattern? And more urgently, what finally broke the spell? The answer reveals a truth more powerful than any exorcism. In 1638, Sister Jeanne d'Ange, the Mother Superior who had started it all, was moved to a different convent. She was taken away from the exorcists, away from the screaming crowds, away from the entire social structure that expected and demanded her performance of possession. The psychological trigger was removed, surrounded by nuns who treated her symptoms as a medical condition to be managed with gentle care, not a demonic force to be fought. Her muscles gradually and painfully began to release. After 3 years as a human statue, she began to regain control. It wasn't a miracle. It was the environment. It was the removal of the 4-step process. Isolation was broken, suggestion was silenced, repetition was halted, and her body, finally given rest, could begin the long, agonizing road to recovery. The process that turned nuns into screaming statues was always medical. Isolation plus suggestion plus repetition plus exhaustion equals a condition modern medicine calls conversion disorder. a condition where overwhelming psychological distress manifests as very real, very measurable physical symptoms. The church didn't discover demons in Loudun. They discovered a psychological weapon, and they used it with terrifying precision. But I need you to understand something crucial. That weapon is not locked away in a 17th century armory. It is loaded and it is being fired. Right now, let's jump forward 390 years to a medical conference in 2025, where neurologists are presenting new research on mass psychogenic illness. But that clinical term doesn't capture the raw human reality. The diagnostic criteria are precise, and they should sound chillingly familiar. 1. Multiple people in a tightly knit social group develop identical, unexplained physical symptoms. 2. No organic cause, no virus, no toxin. No injury can be found. 3. The symptoms spread primarily through observation and social bonds. 4. The symptoms are absolutely real. They are not faked. They are not all in their head in the way we casually mean it. They are the nervous system's physical response to overwhelming psychological stress. Now, let's map that directly onto Loudun, 1634, Step 1, Isolation. The convent was the ultimate closed social network. No competing information, no outside perspective. Just a single terrifying narrative echoing off the stone walls. Step 2, Suggestion. The exorcists, the ultimate authority figures, provided the detailed script. This is what a demon looks like. This is what it makes you do. The desperate human mind latched onto the only explanation it was given. Step 3, Repetition. Over 2,000 hours of performance. The neural pathways for these contortions and screams were carved so deep they became the brain's default setting. Automatic, involuntary. Step 4, Physical exhaustion. The body broke, the muscles locked. The tissue remodeled. The horror became permanently etched into their very flesh. This wasn't a one-time historical anomaly. The church used this playbook again and again. Louviers, France, 1647, the same pattern. Aujon, France, 1658, the same pattern. It was a replicable formula for creating proof and eliminating political enemies. But look around our modern world. The formula is still running. Leroy, New York, 2011. 18 teenage girls at the same high school. They begin developing identical violent tics. Seizure-like episodes, head-jerking verbal outbursts. Neurologists find no organic cause. The media descends. The diagnosis, mass psychogenic illness. The mechanism, isolation within their school social group. Suggestion from media coverage, repetition of the tics, and eventual physical and mental exhaustion. Or look at the rise of TikTok tics. Since 2020, thousands of teenagers, predominantly young girls, worldwide have developed nearly identical Tourette's-like symptoms after watching videos of influencers with tics. Neurologists are publishing papers right now documenting how social media algorithms create hyper-efficient vectors for this same ancient process. Digital isolation in personalized feeds, constant visual suggestion from creators, endless repetition through scrolling, and finally exhaustion. The nuns of Loudun weren't weak. They weren't hysterical. They were human beings whose nervous systems responded exactly as human nervous systems are designed to respond when subjected to this specific, brutal combination of pressures. So I will leave you with the most uncomfortable question of all. A question that history forces us to ask ourselves: could you resist it? If you were cut off from all other perspectives, if trusted authorities coached you daily on how to behave, if you performed the same stress response for months until it became as automatic as breathing, could your body avoid the same fate? Drop a comment with your honest answer. What would you have done in 1634 Loudun? And hit subscribe, because next week we're pulling back the curtain on the Salem witch trials, where the exact same four-step process led to the deaths of 20 innocent people and permanently shattered a community. The methods haven't changed. We've just given them new names. The story of the Loudun nuns isn't just a historical horror story. It's a blueprint. a medical blueprint that our modern nervous system still follows with terrifying precision, because here's what the history books never taught you. Mass psychogenic illness isn't a rare fluke. It's a fundamental feature of the human operating system, a bug that can be weaponized, intentionally or not, whenever these four conditions are met. Let's break down the modern parallels with surgical precision. First, isolation. The convent walls have been replaced by algorithmically curated social media feeds, digital echo chambers, where a single narrative can loop endlessly without a single challenging voice. A closed information system, identical in function to the 17th century convent. Second, suggestion. The exorcists have been replaced by influencers, viral trends, and relentless media cycles. They provide the script. This is how you express distress. This is the tic, the tremor, the fainting spell that signals you are part of this group, that you are suffering in a way that society will recognize. The authority figure is now the crowd itself. Third, repetition. The 3 times daily exorcisms have been replaced by the infinite scroll. Watching the same symptoms performed by dozens of people for hours on end. The neural mirroring is constant, unceasing, and far more efficient than in 1634. The brain learns its new involuntary script at viral speed. And fourth, exhaustion. The physical toll is the same. The nervous system, flooded with stress signals, eventually short-circuits. The muscles tense, the tremors set in, and the body manifests the psychological pain as undeniable physical reality. The diagnosis is different, but the mechanism is identical. The human hardware hasn't been updated, so when you see a cluster of teenagers developing the same mysterious symptoms, or a wave of shared physical anxiety sweeping through a community, you are not looking at a new phenomenon. You are looking at Ludun. You are witnessing the same ancient vulnerability in the human psyche being triggered by modern tools. The playbook is the same, only the stage has changed. This is the uncomfortable, undeniable truth that connects a 17th century French convent to a 21st century high school. Our biology binds us across the centuries. And understanding this pattern isn't just about history, it's about recognizing the same forces at work in our world today. The story of the Ludun nuns is far more than a tale of possession. It is a permanent warning written in the annals of human psychology. A warning we are still learning to read.